Thanks for joining us. Maybe Scott, you can give us a bit about your background, then we can have a bit of a conversation. I think, particularly relevant for this conversation, Scott has been, both in his current private equity back role, but has been at big companies like Dell and P&G. So just a wide ranging experience with the resources that large companies like that bring to bear. But I'll turn it over to you, Scott, just to give a bit of your background, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. I'm a native Texan, and I went to the University of Texas. I have a finance degree there. When I graduated from UT back in '91, I went to Procter & Gamble. They had a finance development program. I spent some time in internal audit and then in other business roles at P&G. And then after that, I was at Dell for 20 years, 19 and a half. I didn't quite make it 20. Great company, had a great career there, a lot of different finance roles at Dell, really built my capabilities at Dell. After Dell, I went to a subsidiary of Dell where I was a CFO of Boomi for a couple of years, another great experience. And now I'm at Broadway Technology, and I've been here for about 2 years as well.
Great. Can you tell us just a little bit about Broadway and the type of business, size of business, just for a point of reference?
Yeah, Broadway is software as a service, and we sell into large financial institutions, fixed income trading products. So it's what traders use to buy and sell government bonds. We also have a hosting business that's very complementary, where we host the software, and then we have professional services that do implementation.
Oh, great. Super helpful. Well, that's great. And so, as we think about the role of the CFO, and for those of you on the line who are new to Consero's business is finance as a service. So provisioning, Fortune 100, Fortune 500 quality finance and accounting, the rigor, the sophistication required typically of private equity backed businesses. So we have several hundred clients, nearly all of whom are backed by private equity. But Scott, as you think about how the role of CFO has evolved throughout your career, and certainly, let's say in the last 10 years, it used to be that kind of running a tight ship, closing the books accurately and getting through a clean audit was a great badge of honor for a CFO. But the role seems to have changed, certainly from from what we hear from all of our clients. And now you're expected to be a partner to the CEO, a partner to the GMs of the business, to the investors, to the board, and practically a technologist as well. So as the digitization of finance has happened in the stack of software, that you're kind of really expected to be a jack of all trades. So kind of curious how that's evolved for you, again, coming from some of these big companies and now to a much smaller company, certainly smaller than Dell and P&G for sure.
No, that's a great question. So, what I would say is when I was at Dell, there was a lot of jobs I had where I was titled CFO, but Dell's such a large company with deep expertise in certain functions like tax, audit, treasury. And so those jobs were really more centered around FP&A, special pricing, variable comp for sales teams, business cases, business decision support. A lot less back office. I didn't really have any responsibility for the back office. I didn't have any responsibility for tax. I didn't have any responsibility for M&A or due diligence. So that's Dell. When I went to Boomi, a lot of those responsibilities were added. Certainly the back office was added, where we had month-end accounting close, we had invoicing and collections, but still Dell handled, just because of scale and efficiency, banking, taxes, and some of those more deep skilled aspects of being a CFO. And then in this job at Broadway, we don't have a parent company. And so my job has really evolved into doing all the M&A, which is much more strategic, doing projects like opening up legal entities in India so we can hire developers, all the due diligence work with private equity firms. We've gone through 2 transactions. And so, I've kind of been on the forefront of helping my company express a lot of the future projections of where we're going, and really convincing, the private equity firms that are investing in our company, why they should believe in us, how they should set up their cash flow models, how they should place a valuation on our company. But it's a lot more end-to-end too. So my evolution of a CFO has been kind of pretty narrowly defined. I'm not saying it was a lot of really hard work and I was super busy, to just breadth, back office, all the way to future thinking.
Sure. So kind of in the past, you were kind of doing a lot of strategy related work in finance. Now you've got the operational and the strategic under your remit. How do you spend your time, and how do you figure out how to spend your time within those two kind of categories, operational versus strategic? And obviously, we help you in the back office regard. So curious your thoughts on how Consero's kind of been a valued partner there.
So I'll just lead with, I'm a huge fan of Consero, and there's probably a reason I got asked to be on this call, but, I walked into this model, and I walked, from a model that was, a self-built finance and accounting team into a model that outsourced the back office. It's given me a lot more time to do what my organization values more, the private equity firms, our CEO, my business partners. It may sound a little cliche, but I try to work 50-50. I do think I have to be heavily involved and take ownership for the operational performance and outcomes and audits and making sure payroll is right. But I can tell you, Consero has a deep expertise and documented steps they go through so that I can rest easy at night that the back office things are being taken care of. And then it allows me to spend more time on the things I really enjoy doing. I like doing FP&A. I like interacting with the board, with our board presentations. I like the M&A activity. It's super exciting.
Yes.
So 50-50 is what I would say.
That's great. Having come from the larger companies and now in a sponsor back situation, if you think about when you first sat in the seat and the timelines, every private equity firm has a hold period that they're, targeting ideally if they're looking to move on from an asset and exit. When you came in on kind of day one into what did your assessment process look like when you're trying to determine, okay, where do I need to focus my efforts and my priorities in getting this function, finance and accounting function in the right position for the current ownership?
I was certainly in learning mode. I think one huge benefit I had was we were in the middle of an audit. We had also just acquired a company. And so there was a lot of opportunity for me to dig right in and partner with the Consero team on both the audit and then the integration. So Consero, another aspect of what Consero and I worked on in the beginning was how do we create a whole new subsidiary of the company I'm in? How do we integrate their processes with our processes? And then there were other just, quarterly deliverables with board meetings and looking at what had been presented before. And then thinking about from my Dell experience, how can we, add additional value to the future projections and what we're reporting out to the board. So I spent the first 4 weeks rolling up my sleeves, getting to know my Consero team, really treating them as an extension of my team, so that we're collaborating weekly in staff calls. And, that helped me ramp to understand what their role was, what my role was going to be, and then think about what I could do as the CFO more strategically for my company.
Sure. No, that's great to hear. And that's certainly what we aspire to be, is kind of an appendage of the existing finance and accounting function for our clients. And to that end, a lot of our new clients come on and they're the CFOs, it's either their first time in a CFO role or their first time working in a sponsor back situation. So very different in many ways, whether you're the first time CFO role, or it's your first time working with PE sponsors. What advice would you have to that first time CFO stepping into a sponsor back situation that might be different from coming from a larger company with all the resources that those larger companies bring to bear?
I think understanding that your audience are owners and there's only a few of them, and they're very vested in the performance of the company, and giving them projections that are achievable and attainable and predictable and highly probable, and then monthly meeting those projections. So you're building confidence in those private equity firms that have invested their money and want to exit. I think secondly, it's building confidence in those firms, that you're going to take accountability and that you're going to deliver all of the compliance that comes along with being a CFO. So first, understanding what does that mean? It means I've got a tax return due on certain days in certain geographies, and making sure you've got the audit firms in place to go deliver the tax compliance, and then making sure you're also doing all the basic blocking and tackling. There's payroll to be met. You can't miss payroll. There's cash that needs to be in certain bank accounts at certain times of the month. You can't miss that. I mean, just really taking a inventory of the blocking and tackling or the operational side, but then, realizing that PE firm audience is very interested in both your projections, and then that monthly you're meeting those projections and telling the story. I mean, they want to understand, what are the drivers of the P&L and the balance sheet, quite frankly.
Fantastic. That's really interesting. Thank you. Just to get back to the M&A side, and so it sounds like we've supported you, Consero supported you through some M&A. Would love to hear about that a little bit. Certainly an area we pride ourselves on. We have one client, we've done something like 40 tuck-in acquisitions in support of them. They're now, over 450 million revenue. So it's an area where we continue to staff up and invest with that domain expertise. Curious, what was your experience with Consero in that regard?
I have two things I would describe that Consero's helped me with, and our M&A has been more acquisition of our company. So we were acquired by our biggest competitor, and then a subset of my company was sold to a private equity consortium. And that process involves due diligence from multiple private equity firms before the firm that eventually wins the bid buys you. And my experience with Consero has not been only that they have quickly assimilated the due diligence responses. So what will happen is I'll get 2 pages of CFO questions, and then within a day or two, I need to be back on a call live walking through the answers. And they're very detailed. They pull our trial balances, and they basically do flux analysis and circle anything they want to know more about. And the other thing that's great about Consero's model is not only can they pull the data, because they're very organized in how transactional support is maintained, but most of my staff, and then actually it's all of my staff now, is in India. And so I can package up work, whether it be due diligence work, which is probably the highest success kind of story I have about Consero, send them the questions the night before. I can get up early the next morning, which is what I do, 5, 6, 6:30, depending on how long the list of questions. It'll be 80% complete. Wow. And then I put the final 20% on the wordsmithing of the answers. We don't send those answers out, but we have a script. And so when we get on a call with the private equity firms, going through the due diligence, we can answer each question, and then we can quickly follow up with supporting documentation if they want to, dig a little bit further. So the experience with due diligence, and that actually applies to audits as well. Audits work similarly, but for me, the audits have been less detailed than the due diligence.
Yeah, well, that's really gratifying to hear, because those are, both M&A and audit are 2 areas where, we run a really tight ship. I like to call it kind of our SWAT team, or a SEAL Team 6, where, a CFO who doesn't have a massive staff at their disposal like big companies do, that we are kind of that pocket ace in the background for a CFO to staff up and kind of really, when needed, for some of these events like M&A, like an audit or a due diligence process. So really fun to hear that. And so, just kind of, taking a different tack here around everything we're reading about is about the difficulty in hiring and, staffing, and that people have so many options, which wasn't what people thought it was going to be like at the beginning of COVID, but that seems to not have abated the hiring spree. But we did a recent survey of about 100 CFOs of companies kind of 10 million to 200 million that Consero commissioned in the tech and software space. And the CFOs reported they spend about a third of their time around talent, hiring, training, managing. And so just curious to what degree you've seen that, and how, if in any way, Consero has helped kind of alleviate some of that, taking some of that off your plate?
I don't have to do any of it. Like Consero's lost a couple of team members or they've rotated to other companies and it's seamless to me. They bring someone else in that, they've got 1,000 employees and, they've got people lined up that they can at least take on the work or completely backfill the person that left. And it's very seamless to me as a CFO. I don't have to recruit. I don't have to spend hiring fees.
Yes.
I don't have to train the person. It's finance as a service. So I continue to get the service level agreement we have. Not to say I don't treat the Consero team as an extension of my team. Like I treat them as my team. But if somebody rotates, Consero is responsible to backfill.
That's great to hear. Thanks. Deloitte had a recent survey that talked about, that CFOs had raised their year-over-year growth expectations for hiring and wages and salaries. And so how, in terms of visibility and managing, kind of finance and accounting spend as a percent of your revenue, which is something we track and benchmark pretty closely. And a lot of PE sponsors track that same metric about, how are companies within their portfolio performing in spend? How has Consero helped, or how do you think about that? And how does Consero fit into that puzzle, if at all?
Well, Consero is an expense for me. It's an annual fee that I have to pay, but I can tell you the expense is low because they're in a low cost region versus a high cost region. And two, the expenses scale very well. So if I think about some of my audit fees and my tax fees, especially as it relates to the complexity of carving out two businesses and auditing purchase price accounting. And, those firms have been tasked with a lot of complexity and their fees have gone up faster. My Consero fee has grown at or below inflation.
Interesting. That's fabulous to hear. On the, you mentioned a bit earlier around international entities, and we work with, we have clients with several hundred international entities around the world. How do you, both independent of Consero and then Consero fit into it? You mentioned setting up entities in India. What kind of partners do you work with? Imagine that's a bit of a laborious process and critical that you partner with the right firms. How do you go about that? Out of curiosity.
We hired a consultant in India and actually Consero recommended the consultant that partners best with them. And that consultant had a whole playbook around what we needed to do to set up the legal entity, creation of legal entity documents, setting up directors. There's a lot of compliance aspects. And Consero's side of it was to create the legal entity in our general ledger. And for the legal entity I'm talking about, at least initially, there's going to be a subledger that's fed into Consero, and Consero will consolidate that into our overall company books.
Well, that's really interesting. Obviously, we aim to be, like the word I used before, an appendage and a partner to the team. What advice would you have to a CFO who's bringing Consero on for the first time of how to kind of get Consero up and running and make the best out of the relationship? And any feedback and thoughts? We like the tough love. It's the only way we get better as well. But I think, really preparing our clients, we really try to prepare our clients for what that partnership looks like, especially in those early days, since it is very different than building in-house by bringing on a partner like us. But any advice and thoughts for anybody who'd be considering that path with us?
I think one of the best things and makes our model work even more efficiently is I hired a controller in India. So I have a controller that sits between me and the Consero team and is in their time zone and is, highly in sync with me and my priorities, but also can approve transactions, can keep them moving overnight and give them real-time feedback. So I would consider that. And it's not super easy if you don't have a legal entity in India to hire somebody, but if you find the right person, you can hire them. There's many ways to do it. And that was that was a game changer for me. Having somebody in the time zone and really kind of helping us with that. I think also just if you bring Consero on, really understanding the systems and tools that they bring to the table, understanding the checklist that they have in place so that you can have confidence every month that, you know, they're not like, they have a checklist. It's a very, you know, solid process that they follow, and they have to follow it. They've got controls in place. They communicate back with you if there's more time needed to complete the checklist, but you can rest assured it's going to be complete.
Yes. That's great to hear. And I think that's kind of part of our value, is that de-risking some of the processes and workflows. And Control Doc is our proprietary backend where, you know, literally every single action item within the month-end close is codified and calendared so that nothing can get missed, even to the extent if somebody on our team does move away from the business, which happens, of course, in any business. There's some natural attrition, but this way, if that does happen, that we're able to de-risk the function, you know, entirely. But yeah, we had one question here. So let's see, Henry, just from Henry. So other outsourcing, the back office work, can you share perhaps a few more value propositions from you and your team from Consero, other than just the back office work? So I think we talked a bit about M&A, any other audit?
I mean, staff augmentation. When we've been acquired and been tasked with big integration type work, we've added a resource at Consero to jump in and help run interference and manage that for us. IT systems and tools. I don't think I can emphasize that enough. In some models, you have to go purchase an expense report tool, a general ledger, a bill payment tool, and you've also got to keep them up and running. So you either have to have your own IT department, or you have to be able to put trouble tickets in with the provider of the IT systems and tools. But with this finance as a service model, Consero owns all that. So it's not just the back office, it's outsourcing the systems and tools. And, you know, our IT team is very lean, and they don't spend any time on the systems and tools that I rely upon. The other thing is creating the legal entity structure within our general ledger. So it's not just the back office, and it's more complicated than it sounds too. We have payroll in multiple countries, multiple currencies. They're providing a cash forecast for us, looking at our receivables and when customers typically pay. And I've added some additional value to that forecast, but they do have capabilities and processes beyond just back office to help you as a CFO.
That's great. Yeah, I was just going to add, Henry, your question. I think on the M&A side, you know, for every new Consero's team, when we're supporting a company in the finance and accounting function, we also then own every integration of every new acquisition and entity. And so you don't have to hire an advisory or consulting firm to do the implementation and some value creation work there. It's just actually part of the service where we're integrating. And since we know the company so intimately well, we know exactly how to roll it in and then ultimately amalgamate all the financials for the, you know, at the parent level. So I think kind of the one-stop shop is certainly compelling.
Well, just to add on that too, there's multiple models, and you could have a near-term model for, we acquired a company as well. So you can have a near-term model where you take a trial balance feed, and Consero will consolidate that for you. And then over time, you can consolidate actually all the transactions into Consero's general ledger.
I had another question direct, Scott. How much do you use the Consero workflow processes? How much do you use Consero workflow processes, or do you build your own? And then do the tools automate much of those processes and adherence on your end?
So if I can play the question back, one of our workflow processes would be purchasing. So Consero is loading invoices into bill.com and ensuring they get routed for approval before they get paid. And then another workflow process would be Nexonia, which is our expense report tool. And same thing, Amex automatically feeds expenses into a person's expense report, and then the person has to actually upload their receipts, but then that expense report gets routed to their manager for approval. Does that, I'm not sure I answered the question. Those are some of the key workflow processes that we have, and they're integrated, I mean, into our ledger.
Sure. Yeah, and I think I'll just add that I think that the processes and workflows, I think part of the value we're bringing and why we're able to get a company stood up so quickly in terms of, maximum 90 to 120 days, we've got the company stood up and we're closing the books for the company, is the fact that we've built these processes hundreds of times and they work. And so, we're 80% of the way there when we bring a company on. It's that last 20%, that last mile that we're kind of the uniqueness of the business is coming into account, and we're just kind of creating those the unique nature of each business to the processing. So, any other questions from the group? Really good questions. Thank you for piping in. Well, look, I think we're up against the half hour, and that was, it's really appreciated, Scott. And as we always say, we're only as good as the feedback we get. We learn as much from our clients. The business we are now is because of all the input we've had and feedback we get from our clients who view us as an extension of their team, and it helps us improve and innovate, frankly. So we spend a lot of time evaluating new software and new technologies. In many ways, we think of ourselves as kind of an R&D lab for the stack of fintech technology under that provides services to the office of the CFO. And so we're always looking at what are the most cutting edge technologies that really integrate well together to provide great service. So we appreciate your partnership and feedback, and wishing everybody a great holiday, unless there's any other questions.
Thanks, Bartley. I appreciate the opportunity, and I appreciate everything your team does. And
Same.
Terry Crasto, that is my point person from your team. He's fantastic.
Oh, that's great to hear. Thanks for that feedback. Great. Well, have a great holiday, and thanks, Scott. And look forward to seeing you maybe in Austin if I can get down there again, COVID notwithstanding.
Love to see you.
All right.
Thanks.
Bye now.